"I never loved you," the CEO said on their honeymoon. Her response changed everything. The ocean outside the villa looked unreal, like something painted by a man who had never known struggle. Turquoise water stretched endlessly beneath a cloudless sky, sunlight dancing across it in careless brilliance. The private infinity pool reflected the same perfection, smooth and untouched, much like the life Adrian Blackwood had built for himself. Maya stood barefoot on the marble terrace, her hands resting lightly on the railing, the sea breeze lifting strands of her dark hair. Anyone watching from a distance would think she belonged there effortlessly. Elegant. Calm. A CEO's wife on her honeymoon. They would never guess how quickly paradise can fracture. Behind her, the sliding glass door opened with a soft mechanical whisper. She didn't turn. She already knew his footsteps. Measured, controlled, never wasted. Adrian Blackwood never did anything without purpose. "This villa cost more than most people make in a year," Adrian said coolly, tapping his phone screen. "Worth it from an investment standpoint." Maya smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "It's beautiful," she replied. "Not everything needs to justify itself financially." Adrian stopped walking. That sentence alone carried quiet defiance. They had been married for 6 hours. Adrian was 36, CEO of Blackwood Global Solutions, a man celebrated in business magazines as emotionless brilliance incarnate. Raised in boardrooms, sharpened by loss, trained to dominate markets before he was old enough to drink. His world ran on logic, leverage, and control. Love had never been part of the equation. Maya finally turned around. She was 30, wearing a simple cream dress instead of the designer gown still hanging untouched in the bedroom. Her eyes, deep, observant, unreadable, met his without hesitation. No fear. No need to impress. That unsettled him more than he would ever admit. "Sit," Adrian said, gesturing to the outdoor seating as though he were beginning a negotiation. Maya tilted her head. "Is this a meeting or a marriage?" Adrian didn't smile. "It's clarity." She sat. He remained standing. "I want to set expectations early," Adrian continued. "This marriage was not built on romance. I never implied it was. You were chosen because you are suitable." Maya folded her hands calmly in her lap. "You're intelligent, presentable, disciplined," he said. "You don't embarrass me. You don't demand unnecessary attention. You understand discretion." The words landed like stones. "And," he added flatly, "I want you to understand something very clearly. I don't love you. I never will." The wind shifted. Somewhere below, waves crashed softly against white stone cliffs, oblivious to the moment. Maya didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at him and smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but knowingly. "I see," she said. Adrian frowned. "That's it." Maya stood and walked toward the small bar near the terrace. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water, then paused. "Would you like one?" Adrian stared. "Did you hear what I said?" "Perfectly," she replied, handing him the glass anyway. "Hydration is important when you deliver life-altering statements." He didn't take it. "I just told you I don't love you." "I know," Maya said evenly. "You've been telling me that in different ways since the day we met." That stopped him. "What do you mean?" Maya took a sip, her gaze steady. "You never asked about my childhood. You never asked what scares me. You never asked what makes me feel safe. You didn't fall in love with me, Adrian. You evaluated me. That's how partnerships work." "No," she corrected softly. "That's how acquisitions work." The word stung. "You married me for status," Adrian said defensively. "Access. Stability." Maya nodded. "And you married me because you believed I wouldn't need you." Silence stretched between them. The sun dipped lower. Adrian exhaled sharply. "Most women would be hysterical right now." "I'm not most women." "No," he muttered. "You're inconveniently composed." Maya stepped closer until only inches separated them. "Can I tell you something, Adrian?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I knew you were incapable of love long before tonight," she said. "I married you anyway." His eyes hardened. "Why?" Her smile faded. "Because I was tired of being underestimated," she said quietly. "And because I recognized your emptiness the moment I saw it." That was the first time Adrian Blackwood felt something close to fear. "You think I'm empty?" he scoffed. "I think you're starving," Maya replied. She turned and walked toward the bedroom. At the door she stopped. "You can sleep here," she said over her shoulder. "Or you can work. Either way, tomorrow morning we wake up married." Then she added softly, "And Adrian? Honesty doesn't end marriages. Arrogance does." The door closed. Adrian stood alone beneath the Santorini sky, holding a glass he hadn't asked for, confronted with a truth no market report had ever prepared him for. For the first time in his life, someone wasn't afraid of him, and for reasons he couldn't explain. That terrified him more than love ever had. The CEO's wife was treated like she didn't belong, until the world began to shift. Morning arrived softly, sunlight spilling across the white stone walls of the villa like forgiveness no one had asked for. Maya woke before Adrian as she always did. Years of discipline had trained her body to rise early, even on a honeymoon meant for indulgence. She stood on the balcony again, wrapped in a light shawl, watching the sea breathe in slow, patient waves. The night before replayed itself in her mind, not with pain but with clarity. Adrian had been honest. Brutally so. And honesty, Maya knew, was a kind of respect most people didn't recognize until it was too late. Behind her, the faint click of keys broke the silence. Adrian was already working. She turned to find him seated at the outdoor table, laptop open, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He hadn't slept much. She could tell by the faint shadows under his eyes and the rigid way he held his shoulders, as if rest were a weakness he refused to indulge. "You're up early," he said without looking at her. "So are you." "This deal doesn't pause because I'm married," he replied. Maya poured herself coffee. "Neither does life." He glanced at her then, briefly. "Measuring." As always. They left the villa an hour later for breakfast at the resort's private dining terrace. The kind of place where servers moved silently, where money didn't announce itself because it didn't need to. As soon as Adrian stepped into view, the atmosphere shifted. Staff straightened. Managers appeared from nowhere. Heads bowed just slightly, subtle, rehearsed respect. "Mr. Blackwood," the maitre d' said warmly. "An honor to host you." Adrian nodded once. "Table by the edge." "Of course." Maya walked beside him, unnoticed. Not ignored exactly, but not acknowledged either. No greeting. No smile. No welcome. Just an assumption. They were seated at a prime table overlooking the water. Adrian was immediately approached by two men in tailored suits, European investors vacationing at the resort. "Adrian Blackwood," one said eagerly. "We met in Zurich." "Yes," Adrian replied coolly. Briefly. Their eyes slid to Maya. Then away. "And your assistant?" the other man asked casually. Maya felt it, not shock, not anger, but recognition. This was familiar territory. "My wife," Adrian corrected flatly. The men blinked, surprised. "Oh," one said, forcing a smile. "Of course. Congratulations." They turned back to Adrian almost instantly. Conversation flowed around her like she wasn't there. Markets, mergers, political leverage. Maya sipped her coffee, listening. Observing. Learning. At one point, a server leaned in and whispered to her, "Staff seating is available if you prefer something quieter." Maya looked up slowly. "I'm fine here." The server flushed and backed away. Adrian noticed, but said nothing. After breakfast, Adrian insisted on attending a private networking brunch hosted by an elite business consortium staying at the resort. "It's informal," he said, "but important." "For you," Maya replied. "Yes." The brunch took place on a terraced cliffside pavilion, white linen tables scattered beneath olive trees. Powerful people laughed easily there, the kind of laughter born from security, not joy. Maya wore a simple navy dress. Elegant. Unbranded. Invisible. She watched as wives and partners clustered together, exchanging shallow compliments and subtle competitions. Jewelry, handbags, husbands' net worths. One woman glanced at Maya and leaned toward another. "She doesn't look like one of us." Maya heard it. She always did. Adrian was soon surrounded, praised, questioned, admired. Maya stood beside him, unintroduced. Finally, a woman approached her directly. "I'm Celeste Monroe," she said, smiling tightly. "My husband runs Monroe Holdings." Maya extended her hand. "Maya. No last name." Celeste's smile thinned. "And what do you do, Maya?" "I build things," Maya replied. Celeste laughed softly. "How nice." Adrian turned just in time to hear that. Something flickered in his eyes. Later, during a guided tour of the resort's architectural wing, the group gathered around a massive scale model of the property. "This resort was designed to symbolize permanence," the guide explained. "Strength. Dominance over nature." Maya studied the structure quietly. "Interesting choice," she murmured. The guide bristled. "Excuse me?" The load-bearing arches are inefficient, Maya said calmly. They'll crack within 20 years unless reinforced. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the group. Celeste smirked. I'm sure the award-winning architects know better. Maya nodded. Awards don't stop erosion. The guide looked offended. Adrian stared at Maya. Not embarrassed. Curious. Later, as they walked back toward the villa, Adrian spoke. You don't correct people like that in public. I correct flawed systems, Maya replied. People just happen to be standing near them. You embarrass the guide. He embarrassed himself by confusing confidence with accuracy. Adrian stopped walking. Do you enjoy challenging authority? He asked. No, Maya said. I enjoy truth. That night, as Adrian worked again, his phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages. Alerts. One of the investors from breakfast had pulled out of a preliminary deal, unexpectedly. Another requested a delay. Adrian frowned. The next morning, the resort manager personally approached Maya during breakfast. Mrs. Blackwood, he said respectfully, may I apologize for yesterday? Maya raised an eyebrow. For which part? The man swallowed. We weren't aware of your background. Adrian looked up sharply. What background? He asked. The manager hesitated. Your wife is the founder of Solace Infrastructure, isn't she? Silence crashed across the table. Maya set her cup down slowly. Yes, she said. Adrian's face drained of color. Solace Infrastructure was legendary, an anonymous powerhouse specializing in disaster-resistant housing, ethical development, and quiet government contracts. Valued in the billions. Operated almost entirely behind the scenes. Its founder had never appeared in public. Never given interviews. Never sought recognition. You, Adrian began. Maya met his gaze evenly. You married me because you thought I wouldn't matter, she said softly. You were wrong. Around them, staff stood frozen. The power dynamic in the air shifted, audibly. Adrian had built his empire on dominance. But for the first time, he realized he had married someone who never needed to dominate at all. They laughed at the CEO's wife, until her silence cost them everything. The air felt different after breakfast. Not louder. Not tenser. Heavier. Adrian noticed it immediately. Conversations paused when Maya passed. Staff who had ignored her now greeted her with quiet respect. Executives who had dismissed her presence suddenly found reasons to linger nearby, pretending coincidence. Power always recognized power, just sometimes too late. Back in the villa, Adrian stood near the window, staring out at the ocean, hands clenched behind his back. Maya moved calmly through the room, reviewing messages on her phone, unbothered. Your Solace? Adrian said finally. Not a question. A fact settling into place. Yes. The Solace Infrastructure? He pressed. The company government's call when cities collapse? Yes. Adrian let out a sharp breath. Why didn't you tell me? Maya looked up slowly. You never asked. That's not fair. It's accurate, she replied. You evaluated me based on what you could see, not what mattered. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. You could have mentioned you were worth more than half the people I negotiate with. Maya's expression cooled. My value has never been measured in net worth. He turned toward her. Then why hide it? I didn't hide, she said evenly. I protected it. There's a difference. Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an investor. It was his board. An emergency call was scheduled in 30 minutes. Adrian's stomach tightened. The call was brutal. A major development contract in Southeast Asia, one Blackwood Global had been courting for months, had been reassigned overnight. To Solace Infrastructure. Adrian stared at the screen. That's impossible, he snapped. We were the front runners. A board member cleared his throat. Apparently, Solace provided proof your designs wouldn't withstand seismic instability. Adrian's mind flashed back to the resort tour. The arches. The erosion. He looked at Maya. She met his gaze calmly. I didn't intervene, she said quietly. They came to us. The call ended in strained silence. For the first time in his career, Adrian felt something unfamiliar claw at his chest. Helplessness. Later that afternoon, Adrian attended another elite gathering, this time alone. Maya declined the invitation politely. I've already been underestimated enough for 1 week, she said. The room buzzed with whispers when Adrian arrived. He felt it immediately, the subtle shift in tone, the glances that lingered just a second too long. One executive leaned in. Rough luck with the Asia deal. Another added, Solace moves fast. Almost Predictive. Adrian clenched his jaw. Then came the blow he didn't see coming. Celeste Monroe approached him, drink in hand, smile razor sharp. "Your wife," she said sweetly. "Fascinating woman." Adrian didn't respond. "Funny thing," Celeste continued. "My husband's company was bidding against Solace last year. Lost. Cost us millions." She leaned closer. "You must feel small." The word hit harder than any insult he'd ever endured. For the first time, Adrian was being judged not by his achievements, but by who stood beside him. And it burned. That night, Adrian returned to the villa later than usual. Maya sat on the balcony, sketchbook in hand, the soft glow of a lantern illuminating her face. "They're afraid of you," Adrian said flatly. Maya didn't look up. "They should be afraid of their own arrogance." "You're enjoying this," he accused. She finally met his eyes. "No. I'm observing it." He exhaled sharply. "Everything I've built, my reputation, can be dismantled by a single quiet decision from you." Maya closed her sketchbook. "I could destroy you," she said calmly. "But I won't." "Why not?" he demanded. "Because this isn't about revenge," she replied. "It's about consequence." The next morning, news broke across financial outlets. Blackwood Global's flagship project, long praised but deeply flawed, was under investigation. Structural weaknesses, ethical violations, insider oversight failures. Solace Infrastructure had released a neutral, data-backed report. No accusations, just truth. Adrian watched the headlines scroll. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, to be judged, to be underestimated. That evening, Adrian stood before Maya, stripped of certainty. "I don't know who I am without control," he admitted quietly. Maya stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time you learn." The CEO lost everything, and learned the price of disrespect. The fall didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Emails unanswered. Calls redirected. Meetings postponed indefinitely. Adrian had lived his entire adult life at the top of invisible hierarchies, where access was instant, respect automatic, power assumed. Now, each small delay felt like a crack in the foundation beneath his feet. By the fourth day of their honeymoon, Adrian Blackwood had stopped pretending it was one. He sat at the dining table in the villa, suit jacket discarded, tie loosened, staring at a legal document he'd already read 3 times. His board wanted answers. Shareholders wanted reassurance. Journalists wanted blood. And for the first time, Adrian didn't have control of the narrative. Maya moved quietly through the villa, preparing tea. She noticed everything, the tension in his jaw, the way his leg bounced unconsciously, the rare slouch of his shoulders. This wasn't the man the world feared. This was a man exposed. "They want me to make a public statement," Adrian said hoarsely. "An apology. An admission." Maya handed him the cup. "For what?" "For failing," he replied. "For not seeing what I refused to see." She sat across from him. "Do you know why your company is under investigation?" Adrian looked away. "Because we cut corners." "Because you assumed no one would challenge you," Maya corrected. "And because you mistook dominance for leadership." He flinched. That afternoon, they attended a final gala hosted by the consortium, a formal closing event Adrian could not avoid. Cameras lined the entrance. Flashbulbs exploded as guests arrived. When Adrian stepped out of the car, the murmurs followed immediately. But it was Maya's arrival that changed everything. She stepped out beside him, not behind, not clinging, but equal. Voice unbothered. Heads turned. Whispers grew louder. "Is that her? That's Maya Blackwood, the Solace founder?" Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Adrian felt every eye on him, not with admiration but judgment. The host stepped onto the stage. "Tonight," he announced, "we honor innovation, resilience, and ethical leadership." The irony was almost cruel. Then came the unexpected. "Maya Blackwood," the host continued, "has been invited to address us." Adrian's heart dropped. Maya stood. The room went silent. She walked to the stage without notes, without hesitation. "I wasn't planning to speak," she began. "But silence is often mistaken for weakness. And that misunderstanding has cost many of us dearly." She looked around the room. "Power doesn't come from titles. It comes from accountability. From how you treat those you believe can do nothing for you." Her eyes flicked briefly, intentionally, to Adrian. Gasps rippled. "I've been dismissed, underestimated, ignored," Maya continued. "Not because I lacked ability, but because I didn't announce it." The room was transfixed. And I've watched people lose everything, not because of bad luck, but because arrogance convinced them they were untouchable. She paused. Let this be a reminder, respect is not optional. And karma doesn't need anger to be effective. It only needs truth. Thunderous applause erupted. Adrian sat frozen. He had never felt smaller. Later that night, back at the villa, Adrian finally broke. I built my life on superiority, he admitted, voice shaking. I thought being untouchable meant being safe. Maya sat beside him. And now, she asked. Now I see I was just alone. He looked at her, really looked at her. I said I never loved you, he whispered. Because loving you meant admitting I wasn't enough on my own. Maya's voice softened. You were never meant to be. Tears burned his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. For the first time he didn't care who saw. He said, I never loved you, but the karma that followed rewrote everything. The last morning of their honeymoon arrived without ceremony. No headlines. No phone calls. No applause. Just silence. Adrian woke before sunrise, something he hadn't done without panic in years. The villa felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a mirror. Every polished surface reflected a man stripped of illusion. Maya stood on the balcony, watching the horizon soften from indigo to gold. I couldn't sleep, Adrian said quietly. She nodded. Neither could I. They stood side by side, not touching, the sea stretching endlessly before them. I resigned this morning, Adrian said. Maya turned slowly. From Blackwood Global? Yes. The word hung in the air, heavy, irreversible. The board didn't ask, he continued. They would have kept me if I fought. If I blamed analysts. If I blamed you. He swallowed. But for the first time in my life I didn't want to win. Maya studied him. Not with judgment. With curiosity. What do you want? She asked. I want to stop being the man who confuses power with worth, Adrian said. I want to learn how to be human without needing dominance to survive. He looked at her then, vulnerable, unarmored. I don't know if I can love the way you deserve, he admitted. But I want to try. Not as a CEO. Not as something impressive. Just as a man. Maya inhaled deeply. This marriage, she said softly, was never about status for me. It was about truth. And truth doesn't promise comfort. Adrian nodded. I know. They returned home a week later. The world greeted them differently. Adrian's fall became a case study, the CEO who lost everything overnight. Commentators debated his arrogance. Analysts dissected his decisions. Former allies distanced themselves. Instant karma, the world called it. But the real karma unfolded quietly. Adrian declined offers to rebuild his empire. Instead he joined Solace, not as a leader but as a student. He sat in meetings where people challenged him openly. He listened instead of commanding. For the first time he was underestimated. And it humbled him. Maya watched closely, not to control, not to punish, but to see if change was real. Months passed. Adrian learned names. Learned stories. Learned how to apologize without justification. He worked on housing projects in disaster zones, places where titles meant nothing and effort meant everything. One evening, exhausted and covered in dust, he collapsed onto the steps beside Maya. I used to think respect was something you took, he said. Now I see it's something you're given, after you earn it. She smiled gently. That's growth. The world slowly stopped talking about Adrian Blackwood. And for the first time in his life, he didn't miss it. 1 year later, standing in front of a completed housing community built for families who had lost everything, Adrian took Maya's hand. I love you, he said, not loudly, not theatrically, just honestly. Maya squeezed his hand. I know, she replied. Not because he had proven himself, but because he had changed.